Welcome, everyone, to another powerful conversation here at the Global Cash Summit, where we are exploring the intersection of purpose, leadership, and profitability in today's evolving world of business. Today, I have the honor of speaking with Suzanne Jabour, founder of Suzanne Jabour Grief Education, and a thought leader whose work is transforming how we understand and respond to grief, not just personally, but organizationally. Suzanne is a grieving mom who has found deep meaning through educating others about how grief really works and how we can support people experiencing it. She's the creator of the Conscious and Curious Grief Method, and her TEDx talk, Grief is Hard, Let's Do Better, has inspired audiences around the world. Suzanne, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this intersection. It's so important.
Yes. Now, you've shared that your personal experience with grief became the foundation for your work today. Can you tell us a bit about that journey and what ultimately inspired you to start Suzanne Jabour Grief Education and create the Conscious and Curious Grief Method?
Absolutely. I think, like most people in the grief space, I come here out of my own personal loss. My most recent, the loss that sort of launched this mission and business was the death of my son, Ben. He died in September of 2020, so just over 5 years ago. And that loss was exactly as devastating, life disrupting, confusing, all the things that if you would let yourself imagine, it was all of that and more. And I discovered that even though I had experienced the death of my dad when I was in my 30s and my mom was when I was in my 40s, I didn't know enough about grief to do it in a way that felt healthy to me.
Mm.
And along that learning journey for my own survival, I just began sharing what I was learning and what I was experiencing. And the response I got from people was universally that there was no one in their life talking about grief like that. Nobody was helping them understand it. Nobody was sharing what was really happening. And people were kind of coming together, in my Facebook friends and family group to sort of say, wow, like I had never thought about it that way. Or, of course, I remember posting one post. I was getting ready for work and getting dressed, and my son was a fashion lover and my often stylist. And I miss that terribly, and I always will. And I was trying to decide one day whether my jeans should go over my boots or like they were skinny jeans, like be folded above. And so I posted a picture of me like looking down at my feet, unable to decide. And it was that kind of honesty about, when we miss our person, when we're hit by the loss, the skill gaps that we need to fill, the, experiences we need to replace, and figuring that out slowly, step by step, took me to a grief educator course with David Kessler because I really wanted to understand whether my experience was typical or atypical. And of course, it was both. And really be able to feel confident about what I knew and how I wanted to share that in the world. And what I really saw, besides that grievers are struggling because we don't know what's happening to us is normal, was that the people supporting them and the places they worked also had no idea what to do. And I was fortunate in my workplace because my direct supervisor was a close friend at the time and knew Ben really well. So he was very supportive. The people above him and at the organizational level had not a clue to play with.
Mm.
Like, not a clue, didn't know how to support me, didn't know what to say, actually said things that were harmful and hurtful, but was kind of like, it's okay. I understand you don't know what to do or say, so I will give you grace and hope for the same in return. But it really became a curiosity of mine that eventually led to this work and this business, both coaching other grievers through the Conscious and Curious Grief Method, which was my download about how I wanted to go forward, conscious and curious as partners, and in looking at how can we change our response as a collective? How do we change our response as business people, both to our own grief? How do we show up in our grief and stay functioning and, get our edge back and keep our businesses running? How do we support our staff who are grieving? How do we support our customers who are grieving? I was having a conversation the other day with another grief, worker advocate, business person, and we were both saying, I don't understand why, you phone into a company and you get their vast list of choices you could make. If you are in a service industry where grievers need to call you early on, if you're a bank, an insurance company, an estate lawyer, why is not option 7 talk to someone who's grief informed?
Mm.
Why don't we have the option of getting to someone who actually knows how to help us and not do harm to your business? So it's really, become this big mission of really my cathedral project, which won't be finished in my lifetime, is shifting the paradigm. And in the meantime, let's grief, proof ish, because we can only ish, let's make your business more grief resilient is a better way to think about it. And let's really provide grievers what they need to be able to craft their own version of what healthy grief looks like.
Yeah, I so appreciate how you've turned something deeply painful into a source of meaning and change. So it's a reminder that leadership really starts with humanity.
Yeah.
And one of the things you talk about is the hidden cost of grief in the workplace. And I think this is such an important and often invisible part of business. So,
Yeah.
from the CEO to the frontline employee, everyone experiences loss, yet most organizations don't have the capacity or the systems to respond meaningfully, as you said. So, can you unpack what that looks like? So, how does unacknowledged grief actually impact teams, performance, and even the bottom line in business?
Yeah. So let's start with the bottom line because we all care about that. The last study I could find was 2022. So pretty recent numbers. The cost in the US alone of unacknowledged hidden grief that we're not helping people with in our workplaces is about $120 billion annually. That's big money.
Yeah.
If there was another problem that was costing our businesses $120 billion, you'd best be sure we'd be doing something about it. But we're so scared of grief that we're not even talking about it. We're just pretending we can, give the person 3 to 5 days off, send them to the employee assistance program, for 3 counseling sessions with someone who's not grief informed, and they'll come back and be productive and, joyful members of our business community. It's just preposterous. It's really just silly. And besides the financial impact, which obviously we care about, the impact on the humans is really, really deep and heavy. And the reality is that about 80% of employees feel unsupported. That's a huge amount of your employees. 1 in 5, between 1 in 5 and 1 in 8 are grieving at any given time. So you might not know about it, but if you have more than 5 employees, it's probably one of them. And that loss is up to impacting their productivity for a couple years. So it's really the first few months that they need some really meaningful support. We need to build a scaffold of support around that person. We need to look at their tasks. We need to look at, creating spaces that they could grieve. We say to people, oh, well, if you get upset or you get overwhelmed, you can just go cry in the bathroom. Like, how is it good enough that we're sending our people to go cry in a bathroom? It's craziness. So really having a quiet place they can go if they get overwhelmed. We do it in preschools. We do it in kindergartners. Why we're pretending as adults we don't have emotions, I will never understand. Right? Or a system where they have I think about when I was teaching and I was substitute teaching, and various classes would have different systems for the kids to be able to go to the washrooms. And my favorite ones were when they just flash the W, right? You flash the W to the teacher, you get acknowledged, you get to go to the washroom. What if we just had a signal that was like, I need to go for a walk. I'll be back in 5. If you can't find me, I'm just going to calm myself down. Mm. What I hear from business owners, supervisors, managers, bosses, CEOs is they don't want drama. I want you to imagine what it looks like if you have given the person permission to go for a walk when they need to go re-regulate their emotions. So they feel the overwhelm coming, because this is the reality of grief, right? They feel that overwhelm coming. They do whatever the equivalent is of flashing a W to go to the washroom. They get to go for 5 minutes, have a walk, get a coffee, whatever it is, and we know they're going to come back. There is zero drama there. The flip side is they feel that overwhelm coming. They fight the tears as long as they can. Their face is red. Now they're crying. Now all of their, shared space employees that care about them on their team are standing at their desk asking if anything is wrong. They're saying, "Oh no, I'm fine. It's okay." That's what drama looks like. Drama looks like we are not openly allowing this person to go and take care of themselves. And the modeling that we can do is how we can shift everything. Because grief happens not only for the loss of a loved one, that's the big ones. We all know that. It happens every time you restructure. For most organizations, that's every 3 to 5 years. The people left behind have grief too. So, how do we talk about that? It happens if you launch a product and it doesn't go the way that you expected. It happens when your quarterly earnings target doesn't get hit, right? What if at those meetings that we're so good at having, where we pivot, we replan, we repurpose the content, we change the program, we update the product? What if the beginning of those started with the leader saying, wow, I'm really disappointed that this did not go the way we hoped. Mm-hmm. And you might all have some feelings about that too. I want you to know you're safe here. I'm having some feelings. You're having some feelings. That's all okay. If we want to take 2 minutes to just like say what we're feeling and release all of that before we pivot, this is a safe place to do that.
So powerful. And I think it reframes how leaders think about wellness, retention, and real productivity. And there's really a financial and human cost. So you've said that there's a measurable financial cost to ignoring grief. There's lost focus, there's disengagement, there's turnover. Can you give us an example of how that shows up inside organizations and what could shift if leaders invested in supporting grief more effectively?
So it shows up a number of ways, and there's definitely things you can look for in your employees, in your team members. You're going to watch for changes in behavior, right? And if you have someone, for example, who's always, first to arrive at the meeting, they're always 5 minutes early, and now all of a sudden they're late. That's worth thinking about. If we can open our curiosity to what might be behind the shifts in behavior, right? Maybe you have someone who used to be the party planner who now is like, oh, you know what? I don't think I can take that on, right? Or they're not even going to come. Those kind of shifts you can watch for because not everyone is going to come to you, right? If they're entitled to bereavement leave in your policy, you'll hear about the loss. If it's a person that doesn't entitle them to bereavement leave, you might not even know about it. And if it's because of a relationship or the house or a side hustle or their car got totaled or who knows what other losses, estrangement, pets, like there's endless amounts of them, you probably won't know about those at all. So if we're watching for those shifts in behavior, then we can be saying, hey, I'm just curious if something's going on for you and you need some extra support because we're here to support you because you're a valued employee and we want to keep you and we want you to be happy, right? We want you to feel productive and welcomed and belonging, all those things we're trying to build. The other place to look for it is in people whose productivity drops, right? When you're seeing the deliverables aren't happening on time, right? Or they're losing track of the thread. A really common thing that happens to people in grief is multi-step processes. I talk about this in my TEDx, right? Multi-step processes become really hard to do. So if I have to do them in order, I have to do A, and then I have to do B, and then I have to do C in order to get to D. Often we get to B and we're looking around confused because we don't remember how we got here or where we're supposed to go next, right? So if you're seeing those kind of changes, that's time to open up that conversation. If you know about the loss, there are some very specific kinds of support that you can offer. I always argue to business owners, if you have a return to work policy for someone who got injured, you need a return to work policy for people who are grieving because they need that same, menu is the best, sort of analogy of adaptations, things we can do, accommodations we can make. What we have to watch out for, and the story I hear from grievers all the time, is in really great organizations that want to support people. They show up. We have that meeting when the person comes back, right? Can we pull some tasks away? How's your capacity? They remove some tasks, but they don't make a plan for giving them back. And they don't remove the duties in consultation with the griever. So I hear from grievers all the time that say things like, yeah, they were great. They helped, they took some of my tasks away. They let me delegate them. Team members stepped up. That was all really wonderful. But they didn't make a plan for me to get those back. And they took away the ones I really liked. So I was left with a job I didn't like anymore with people who felt overburdened because there was no way for them to give those tasks back to me. And I ended up leaving. So it's like we tried really hard, but we missed the mark because we were too scared to keep that communication open.
Right. It's incredible how compassion can actually become a driver of sustainability and profit
Yeah.
and not be a distraction from it. So let's talk about some practical tools, okay? So, what are some of the first steps that leaders, HR professionals, or even small business owners can take to create more compassionate workplaces that truly hold space for people who are grieving?
So the first thing we need to do is look at ourselves as leaders, right? How are we modeling our own grief? How are we modeling grief that happens in our personal lives? How are we showing up to support other people? How are we taking care of our customers? How are we modeling grief in those kinds of meetings that I talked about before? Because nobody will be more vulnerable at work than the leaders are, because it's not safe. So we have to really first look at ourselves and then really look at, where does grief show up in our business? So it comes from three different places. People bring it from their personal lives. So our staff are bringing it from their personal lives. Our customers are bringing it from their personal lives. It happens in our business, or it happens because something has happened to someone in the workplace.
Mm.
So it's a colleague that has died or been injured or had to leave or whatever it is. So we're bringing it from home. Can be happening in our community. It might even not be our personal grief, especially at this moment when there's so much upheaval globally. Lots of us are carrying grief that is collective and is because we're watching other people suffer, right?
Mm.
So it's coming, we're bringing it with us. It's happening at work through things in work, like reorganizations, like, quarterly drops or product launches. And it's happening at work because people at work are either dying or getting injured or whatever's happening. So we can do an assessment, and we'll talk about that more, both in the training I'm doing for the summit and in the workshop I'll offer. Really, how do you dig in there and figure out, for your business, for your team, for your solopreneurship with fractional folks working for you, for your big organization, how do you look and see, where might it be? And then how do we want to respond? How can we shift our culture? How do we find the people in our organization that are grief informed? Because every organization probably has them, right? Someone like me, who from their own experience really could show up in a really powerful way. How do we empower them to do it? How do we train our supervisors, that direct report person, to know what to say when the person comes back, to even have a conversation with them before they come back to ease that reentry, right? There's so many practical things we can do. How do we use tools that are tech tools that we all have, that are, for most of us, in our pocket computer, right?
Right.
How do we use those tools to support the brain fog and the disconnection with time, right? What if we had a shared calendar on our team that had all our appointments in it, with a 10-minute reminder that was going to pop up on everyone's computers? The griever, who's not sure what time or day it is, now doesn't have to remember or worry that they're going to miss something. So their capacity is released for what we really need them to be doing and we want them to be doing. They're not spending it in the swirl of worry.
Yeah. This is
And the ripple effect goes to everybody else too.
Mhm. Yeah, that's such a gift, really, because it's not about having all the answers. It's about creating
No.
the conditions for healing and growth.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, how can CEOs and executives develop the emotional intelligence required to navigate grief, their own teams, while still leading with strength and clarity?
The best way that you could do that is through honesty and through opening up those conversations, in being the person that takes that first step to be a little bit vulnerable. Because the reality is, that old business model where we want our CEO to be all powerful and knowing and all of that, none of us actually want that anymore, right? The vast majority of us, that doesn't feel safe anymore, because that feels closed. It feels artificial. It feels unattainable. We don't actually aspire to that. And we do want to be, we want our team members, we want our employees to be aspiring to work their way up in our organizations. But if what that means is that you have to be shut off, you have to be unemotional, you have to be hard and go getting and push energy, most employees don't want that anymore. So it's really, behooves us as the leaders, as the CEOs and the founders and the, heads of department and the managers, to really look at, how do we bring our whole selves to work? How do we shift our work culture? It's one of the very few places that trickle down actually matters. It really works, right? Trickle down economics, not so much. Trickle down emotional intelligence, absolutely. The best thing that you can do is gain the skill of being able to name your emotions with nuance.
Mm.
Because if we are still living in the what I fondly refer to as the sad, glad, mad trifecta, we're not really being emotionally honest. Because under sad, mad, glad is really much more nuanced words like maybe disappointed or confused or irritated or frustrated or excited or courageous or all of the things. But if we're still saying, oh, I'm mad about that, there might be some room for growth. So, really, the best thing we can do as the leaders is do the work it takes to have that growth, to have that emotional intelligence. We've been talking about emotional intelligence versus intellectual intelligence since I was standing around in the playground with other moms at elementary school. My daughter's 31. We know emotional intelligence is important. This is not new news, but it really, really matters. And how we model that gives other people permission to do the same.
Yes, beautifully said. So leadership is not about suppressing emotion. It's about
No.
integrating it, being honest, having those connections, being open with your employees and with your business, and also being compassionate. In terms of compassion, there is grief that goes beyond the grief of the passing of the person. It is also the grief of the lifestyle that we had before, grief of the life the things that we were going to do that we did not do, the disappointment that we didn't do those things and now the clock is up and time is over and that's never going to happen, or grief that the future that we thought we had is not going to be there. And never mind the fact that there are also sometimes extraordinary circumstances piled on people who are left behind, say, for example, medical bills.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there's that great financial burden that these bills need to be paid, and the person has passed. And now you still have to go through your grief as well. So let's go deeper into your method, the conscious and curious grief method. Can you share what makes it unique and how it helps people charter their own path through grief?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really does come out of my own understanding of how I was going to grieve in a way that felt healthy. Conscious is about those emotions we were just talking about. So that sense of how do I name this thing that's happening to me? How do I name this feeling? My daughter so aptly said it's all the emotions all at once. In that acute early phase, you are in the muck of all of them. And I knew that our really tried and true Western way of boxing it up and shoving it down and pretending it's not a thing was going to make me ill. I was very clear that was not the path forward. So I had to allow all of them to just be okay. Even the horror, the despair, the despondency, the sadness, the deep frustration, all of it had to be okay. And curious was about staying in that sort of growth mindset, being curious. What might be possible? What baby step could I take? And really, the first time I really remember feeling so curious was standing in the kitchen, and I was sobbing so hard that I couldn't breathe. That sobbing where you're just gasping, and I remember so clearly thinking, how, when you are sobbing this hard, do you oxygenate your body?
Mm.
Like, my body needs oxygen, and it is not getting oxygen right now, and I need to figure out how to do that. So the curiosity really started around basic survival. How do I do this incredibly hard thing, right? How do I phone the cell company to cancel my child's cell phone? Like, you have to do unspeakably hard things as the person who's left behind.
Right.
That's where the curiosity started. And then really turned into, what could I do next? How can I continue this conversation? How can I have bigger outreach? How can I talk to more people? Where can I be heard? And eventually has led me to start this business. So the conscious and curious grief method has 5 steps, which, because it's grief, don't happen in a linear way. They kind of happen like a tangled up ball of yarn the cat got at. We start really looking at the brain fog. And this is the piece where our employer, our company that we work for, can really, really help, because our brain in grief is actively reprogramming itself. So it's mushy. And our memory, our relationship with time, our ability to do multi-step tasks, all of that gets compromised. So we start with building a structure around that grieving brain to release some of the things it's worrying about so that we can use our capacity where we need to. Step two is that conscious piece. So really building that emotional intelligence if we don't have it already, utilizing it, reconnecting with it if we already have it, really leveraging it to allow those emotions to just pass through us, right? The big fear in emotions in grief is we're going to get stuck in them. The acknowledging them, the welcoming them keeps them going. It's the denial that gets us stuck. So we want to just keep them flowing. Curious, no surprise, is step three. How do we stay curious, just open to something, anything? How do I get through the day? How do I feed myself? How do I connect with nature? How do I do a tiny, tiny baby piece of self-care, right? The next step is to really look at dreaming again. So allowing that curiosity to move beyond survival and self-care and getting through the day, really to, what do I want my life to be next? What do I want? Who do I want to be next? I was very clear. I was not the same person. I had to rebuild myself too. So that's another loss that layers on top of all of the griefs we're already experiencing. So really opening that curiosity to where we're dreaming bigger dreams. And then last is finding ways to take action towards those dreams. So blending our conscious and curious, moving on to really, what's our big dream for our life now? How might we step forward into the world? How might we, pivot our business or change our focus or be more compassionate to others, right? It doesn't have to be, I'm going to go on global stages and have a TEDx talk, right? That's where my path led me. Your dream might be, how do I really deeply support my family? How do we maintain this? How do we create rituals to carry this person with us? Our dream can be all kinds of different things. And then how do we take baby steps? It's a baby steps, eat the elephant one bite at a time. Yeah. Baby steps can get you anywhere you want to go if you keep taking them.
That approach is so empowering, and it gives people permission to heal on their own timeline, with agency and with grace. And you mentioned the TED Talk. So your TED Talk was Grief is Hard, Let's Do Better. It has reached so many hearts. What kind of responses have you received, and how has that experience shaped the way you approach your mission today?
I've had such amazing responses, and I have to say, when I was writing my TEDx and delivering it, which is so exciting, I really was focused on it being for supporters, because I think there's such a gap. Grievers bumble through it and we kind of have to figure it out. And of course, I wanted to support them too, but I really wanted it to be for supporters. These business people we're talking to today, friends and family, the neighbor down the street, to know that there's a different way we can show up and we don't have to stay terrible, right? We're terrible at it as a collective. This is a no shame, no blame conversation. We don't have the skills and the knowledge. We can fix skills and knowledge. That's easy. We have to learn. So I really wanted it to be for supporters. And I've gotten amazing, responses from supporters who are like, oh, okay, I feel like I kind of can craft my own, what can I say, right? And I feel like I can find my own offer for what can I do to help people. And some of the most touching responses I've got are from grievers who, when I was talking about my own experience and sharing some of the symptoms that are common, some of the ways that grief impacts us, they really felt understood for the first time. Or they felt like someone really saw what they were going through, or they felt like there was nothing wrong with them. People had been trying to help by saying, no, you're okay. You should be fine by now. All those things we say that are so harmful. And so they had been sort of swamped in that. And to have someone standing on that round red dot saying, it's okay. If you feel all these symptoms, if you feel confused, if you're clumsy, if your digestive system is a mess and you can't sleep, it's okay. That's fine. Because, I remember in our coaching for the organization I worked with, who had a really powerful coaching program for us, the speakers, one of the coaches saying to a different speaker, you don't have to worry that people are going to worry for you, because you're up there standing on that round red dot. You have already won. So to be able to speak from that powerful of a platform and say to people, it's okay if you don't know how to respond. It's okay if you don't understand what's happening to you. It's okay if you don't know what to say or do. It's all okay. It's because as a collective, as a society, a culture, a whatever, we don't know how. So if we can talk about it, if we can open up those conversations in our workplaces, and I think for me, that's why I'm so passionate about workplaces, because it's a place we already have shared agreements. We already have community. We have a big ripple effect because if we can impact your employees and your team, your structure, they go out and they impact other structures. So, where can we get the biggest ripple? It's 100% from looking at our workplaces.
I love that. And it shows how universal this conversation really is
Yeah.
and how desperately workplaces really need to bring this awareness into leadership training as well.
Yeah.
So at the Global Cash Summit, we're talking about the new era of business, one where human capital and emotional intelligence are just as valuable as strategy and innovation. So how do you see this shift, this rising awareness around grief and compassion influencing the way we build companies and communities in the next decade?
I actually think it's a really powerful way that companies can differentiate themselves because the grief conversation is happening. That ripple of conversation and people understanding. When I started talking about this really actively about 4 years ago, I would have to educate people that grief didn't just come from the loss of a loved one. And now I have people say that to me. And I'm like, oh, the message is getting out. This is exciting. So imagine if, as part of your onboarding, you said, we care about our employees so much that we're really grief resilient here. And here's our grief response policy. And here's our training module that, we had this amazing consultant create with our company. Here's our leadership talking. This can be part of our recruitment, right? We're all trying to get the top talent. This is how companies will differentiate themselves because we know companies want to make money. We know companies want to be profitable. We know they want to make great products and have great impact and serve customers. That's a given. What is not a given yet is that they actually are taking action to take impeccable care of their employees. And if you could say to someone at your onboarding in your recruitment process, oh, this is how our CEO talks about grief and loss. This is how we deal with it as a company when it happens here. This is how we support each other. This is a wedge into all of the ways we could support each other.
Hmm.
And it's a spot that we all know is going to happen to us. It's a universal experience, but you can take that knowledge and growth that you're having as a company and apply it in all kinds of other places. And it's a way that with this wave of change in how we manage people, in how we want our company to stand out, we can really be at the forefront of this conversation. And it's really impactful. And you can save your portion of that $125 billion. There's a money thing there too. So it really is a win-win for everybody.
Yes. Now, Suzanne, before we wrap up, if you could leave one message with our Global Cash Summit audience, one thing that you hope every leader, every entrepreneur, every organization takes away, what would that be?
The way that you respond to grief in all forms from all people that your company touches really matters.
That's such an important message. Suzanne, thank you for sharing your heart, your wisdom, and your leadership with us. Her work really reminds us that compassion isn't just a value, it's a strategy for sustainable success. Suzanne, thank you again for joining us at the Global Cash Summit. Everyone else who is here today, even if you're watching this on a replay, please note that Suzanne has left us a free gift for everyone. So you'll see that in your dashboard. And also, if you have not upgraded to VIP, you should do so because Suzanne is going to be giving a training on this over the course of the next couple of weeks. And you're going to get an opportunity to do a workshop with her as well that can really impact your workplace, your business, and how you are functioning around this very important universal topic. Thank you again. A special thank you to our guest, Suzanne Jabour, for her courage, her insight, and compassion, reminding us that healing and leadership are not separate paths, but one shared journey.